I'm excited to have Alfred McComber here with me today, and he's talking about a topic that I know a lot of people have probably been interested in. You may or may not been aware of kind of the changes things have gone through when it comes to keeping children safe. Back in the day, at least when I was a mother with smaller children, a lot of it was just, teaching kids not to talk to strangers, maybe, and a couple of other things, but nothing terribly in depth. I guess we did teach our kids certain skills that have obviously served them well as far as observance and kind of personal boundaries and what to let people know, what not to let people know. I was reading through some of your presentation now, and there are a few things that we actually did when the kids were little that I thought really we were the only people that ever thought of them because they were weird, like code words. I happened to work with camp with 500 children and train staff on how to keep kids safe, as well as spot abused children and how to handle a child that may be being abused, and how not to hand the child off to a parent during a divorce situation when there's custody battles. So we had some of that, but there's a lot more into it even now, 20 years later, than there was back when I was raising children. So I'm excited to have you here this evening to kind of talk to everyone, tell everybody some updates and some great things that are going on. I'm not going to go into a huge, long bio, but I would like for you to introduce yourself a little bit, kind of, because a lot of your bio is on the page. People probably read it, and you have a lot to share. So I don't want to take it up with me rambling. So go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about your background and what you bring to the table tonight.
Well, super. Can you hear me okay?
Got you good.
Well, fantastic. First off, I want to thank you, Donna, so much for having me as a special guest here on the Preparinar. There's so much great stuff that you guys do at Prepare Magazine along with your husband, Joseph, and we're just very, very excited to be joining you tonight. Of course, Joseph has been on my Code Red show, which is dedicated to personal security, safety, and emergency preparedness issues. I am very, very grateful and fortunate. I've been involved in law enforcement and high-level dignitary protection for many, many years. I've worked on both the full-time sworn side of law enforcement as well as a reserve police officer, but also doing very, very high level dignitary protection involving royal family members, corporate executives, foreign dignitaries, politicians, things of that nature, and really working with folks on their personal security, their safety, and their emergency preparedness. I've also had the pleasure of working in emergency preparedness operations as a duty response officer, as well as back in the day on the rescue squad, responding to calls and so forth. And since 2004, I've been hosting a show called the Code Red Show, which is specifically dedicated to personal security, safety, and emergency preparedness issues. That's all we cover. So what do you do if your house is on fire? What happens if somebody puts a gun in your face? What if you're in the middle of a riot? What if someone next to you falls out because they're having a seizure or they're having a heart attack? So we cover a lot of different things. And at the end of the day, our basic premise is that you are ultimately responsible for your personal security, your safety, and emergency preparedness. And you may actually be the first responder when something actually happens. So having some information to be able to respond, not just react like, oh, this is terrible, what am I going to do? But really have a plan of action. And that's what we kind of teach. And we're so excited to be with you tonight.
Well, we're really glad that you're here to share your area of expertise, as well as kind of let people in on some other things that you've just recently been connected with that kind of expand your reach a little bit into childhood safety, as well as the whole family preparedness. I do want to let you know, I think we're picking up a little bit of a squeak. I don't know if it's a cord or something hitting the lapel maybe. I just wanted to let you know we're picking up just a little bit of a click and a squeak. I'm not sure if there's anything on your end or if it's mine, but it might be that. Yeah, that may be it.
With today's technology.
I have a lapel mic that does that all the time, so that's why I just stick to this thing, because it's the only one that doesn't rub against something on me to squeak. But and I'm looking at my chat room is not opening up, so we're having technical difficulties, of course. But you have recently acquired and are now the president and CEO of Child Shield USA, which is something we're going to get into a little bit more. Obviously, this whole focus is on keeping children safe. And this is a company that's dedicated to that, and they've been around for a long time. Can you give everybody just a brief history about that and kind of how you've come on board and what you're wanting to do with it?
Yeah, we're very, very excited and very, very blessed to recently become the owners of Child Shield USA. It's a company that's been around for over 25 years, helping parents and grandparents and legal guardians learn top quality information on things that they can do to protect their children from becoming missing, abducted, kidnapped, and then also training for the children as well. And because it's one thing if the parents know the information, totally different if the children know the information. And then what happens is they have what we call in dignitary protection a backup to the backup. And that means if there's ever a situation where a child that's covered by our service goes missing for any reason, we have a series of emergency crisis response services that go into effect. We put up to a $50,000 cash reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of anyone involved in the disappearance of your child. We also hire a full-time private investigator to get involved in the case right from the beginning. Those first 24 to 48 hours are so critical when a child goes missing. And so we actually hire a private investigator to get involved in the case to work alongside the law enforcement as well as the family to do all that they can to help locate the child. We also have a very unique system. It's a patent pending system that allows us to have a video clip of your child as well as a photograph and other pertinent information about your child. We are actually able to share with the local law enforcement agencies that are involved in the missing child case that literally within 10 or 15 minutes of being notified, we can actually have a picture as well as video of your child streaming right to the MDTs, the mobile data terminals within the police units. And then lastly, we are also connected with the media to do the same type of outreach. And then we have a newsletter that comes out each and every month. It's called The Shield, and it provides specific information for parents and grandparents and legal guardians on what they can do to keep their kids safe. So it's not just a one-time thing, it's an ongoing service and education program.
Yeah, and when it comes to childhood safety, just like when kids grow, they outgrow their shoes, they outgrow this, they're going into another section of life that they need to be reminded of how to keep themselves safe at that point in their lives. And
Absolutely.
parents need to be reminded that you don't keep a 10-year-old safe like you do a 3-year-old. So that's wonderful how it's ongoing like that. Well, I appreciate you kind of bringing that in early on. We had planned to talk about that at the end, but I'm still dealing with those technical difficulties. We'll go ahead and start with the presentation. And that way, hopefully in the meantime, I don't know, little magic Keebler elves will come in and fix the technical issues. I don't know what's going on. We had everything working in practice. It was great.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, today I just I can't get the thing to open up to save my life, but hey, whatever.
And that's the exciting thing about the whole arena of preparedness. You just never know, but the show goes on and you do what
Yeah.
you do and you keep things rolling. So for those of you that are curious about emergency preparedness, one of the first things is roll with it.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, I do have the backup. If you are not getting into the chat room, which I'm looking at, it's not open. You're probably not getting in. Send an email to preparinars@gmail.com. I will read your question through there to Al after the presentation. So it's basically the same thing. It's just a little workaround for you. I apologize. Open another tab and open up your mail and send me an email, and I'll read Al the question that way if we can't get the technical little elves to work together. So I'm going to go ahead and open up your presentation and let you get started with that. So. Okay, first, before we get going, I want to make sure you can see the screen. Al, do you see your first slide?
I do.
Okay, great. We do have the one housekeeping of a disclaimer, and it is important for everyone to understand that neither of the featured guests here, Mr. Alfred McComber, or the Preparinar nor Prepare magazine can accept any responsibility for any loss, injury, or damage caused as a result of using the various tips and strategies that are discussed in this Preparinar, nor for criminal prosecution or civil action brought or instituted against any person or body that might result from any use of these tips or strategies discussed in tonight's presentation. Basically, the short of this is don't check your brain at the door. Al's got some great information, but this is for you to build on. And we have a lot of that happens with what we do with the magazine, with our trainings, with the Preparinars. This is facilitating information. It's not dictating information that says follow it exactly and all will be well. You prepare, you know that's not possible. So this is basically the same thing. Al's going to give you some great info, and upon your own home, your own life, your own children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, just build upon what works best for your area. So go ahead, Al, and you are ready to go.
Well, once again, Don, I want to thank you very much for having us on tonight's special event to share some information that hopefully will get people thinking about what would they do if there's really a challenge? What is your plan of action? Because so often things happen so quickly. So I'm very excited that each of you have taken time out of your busy schedule to join us for some thought-provoking information that could actually help save your child's life, or at the very least avoid serious injury, whether they are newborns all the way through college students. And one of the key concepts that I'd like for you to leave with tonight from tonight's presentation is the fact that you are ultimately responsible for your child's personal security, safety, and emergency preparedness. And I know this may sound crazy, but as we get through the presentation, one of the things I always talk to people about is they always think that there's some magical bullet when it comes to safety and security and emergency preparedness. And the fact of the matter is, most of it, quite frankly, is common sense, basic stuff. So if you hear any what I call Captain Obvious comments from me tonight, please understand that the idea is to provide as much information as I can, but make sure that you realize that it's all based on just common sense things, and so that you can get as much information as you can from this. But understand that even though it may sound obvious, a lot of times knowing about stuff versus actually doing it are two totally different things. And even if we know something, that doesn't necessarily mean our kids know something as well. So we want to keep that in mind as we talk about this stuff tonight. As a dignitary protection agent, I've been specifically trained to look at personal security and safety, as well as emergency preparedness, with what we call an all hazards approach to preventing critical emergency situations from occurring, instead of being forced to react to a crisis situation that could have been prevented from happening in the first place. So we teach this theory of always having a backup to the backup. It's so very, very important, and we're going to be talking about this evening. So since we're specifically covering child safety and security tonight, let's first cover some of the basic facts and information from some very knowledgeable sources, including the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the U.S. Department of Justice, the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, as well as our own firm, Child Security, Child Shield USA. So as we go through this stuff, and Donna, if you're there, I'm getting some information that the actual slides are not showing up on the for our guests. So if you could double check on that.
All right, let me check on that. Let me see if we can go back to. All right, see if that's working out any better for everybody. They were showing, if you were seeing, now you're seeing them in large form.
Yep.
And I'm seeing them, and they're set as presentation. Let's see.
Yeah, I can see them here, but we have another system across the office,
and
it's not showing up across the office.
Let's try that. Let's try this and see.
And again, ladies and gentlemen, as we're getting this worked out, that's one of the exciting things about emergency preparedness and safety and security. You never know what's going to happen, even with the ultimate preparedness. That's why we always say have a backup to the backup to the backup, because things will, be a challenge. But this is part of that, is, having the additional screen so we can, see if there's a challenge. And it did come up on the screen there. There it goes. I think we're now... we are now officially cooking with gas.
There we go. See, that's funny, because we ran through it. We had a glitch on Monday, couldn't get the run through going. So we ran through yesterday and everything was running through great. And so here it is today. Live always means, a little bit of discomfort. So here we go. As long as it's up now, we are perfect.
We are ready to roll. So, as we were saying, let's look at some of the basic facts from very knowledgeable sources. As mentioned, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the U.S. Department of Justice, as well as the FBI, and even Child Shield USA. The bottom line is there are nearly 1 million children reported missing each and every year in America. And of those, only about 100 are what we refer to in law enforcement as actually kidnapped, which means taken by force. Really, over 2,000 kids a day are actually reported lost or missing to law enforcement authorities across the United States. And sadly, many of the abducted children are actually dead within an hour of being abducted. So it's a very, very challenging situation out there. So as we go over to the next slide, it's important to realize that out of every 1 million children in America, the statistics show that 10,000 of those children will be reported missing. And based on the most recent statistics, there is a 1 in 100 chance that your child will become missing in the next 12 months. And that is not meant to scare you. It's just looking at the statistics and what's really going on out there on a regular basis. Now, many children are actually taken by molesters who have actually spent weeks and months and even years gaining the trust of the child and oftentimes their parents as well. And that's why one of these challenges is that most children today are not taken by strangers or what the child might perceive as a stranger. But even more shocking is this next statistic, and that is that 1 in 100 children will actually be abused or even molested on an ongoing basis, and their parents won't even know anything about it. The other challenge is that having your child become missing, it's actually surpassed all other ways of losing a child. So whether it's through a car accident or illness, it is a big, big challenge. And we just need to wake up across America, not only our parents, our grandparents, our children, our neighbors, our people that we work with, and get real serious about what we're going to do to help keep our kids safe. And it's part of an overall plan. There's not just one specific strategy. So as we move forward, we want to talk about one challenge that often can lead to a potential for a false sense of security when it comes to child safety and security issues. Now, I want to be very, very clear. I'm not knocking any of these programs that you see below, whether it's a child ID program, completed fingerprint cards. And the reason I say completed is it's one thing to get some fingerprint cards. It's something totally different to actually have your child's fingerprints rolled, what we call in law enforcement, onto the actual cards themselves. DNA sample kits, dental impressions. The problem with these things is while they give you a sense of feeling good that you're doing something, the bottom line is they do absolutely nothing to prevent your child from becoming missing in the first place. Even the nationwide government program, the Amber Alert system, very well-known program. It's done a lot of good in communities across the nation, and even GPS tracking devices that are available on the market today. They do nothing to prevent your child from going missing. So as a law enforcement guy, as a bodyguard guy, a dignitary protection agent, our whole thing is we want to prevent the situation from happening in the first place. So just keep that in mind, that sometimes it's great to have those things, but the sad truth is they're often used to identify a body. So we want to keep that in mind. I want you that are tonight with us that are parents and grandparents and legal guardians. For a few moments here, I'd like you to imagine a few different scenarios. The first one, you look out into your backyard where your daughter was playing just a few moments ago. You don't see her anywhere. You call out for her by name, but she doesn't answer. Or let's say, for instance, your son left an hour ago to walk 3 short blocks, just heading down to his best friend's house for dinner. You get a call from the boy's best friend's mom calling saying, "Hey, your son has not arrived." It creates a real world challenge. Let's go on to the next slide. You could be at a baseball park with your son. You go to the refreshment stand, just want to get a hot dog and a Coke. You take your eyes off your son for a few moments to pay the bill for the food. You turn around and he's gone. Or what about this? You're waiting at the bus stop for your 5-year-old to return from kindergarten. The bus arrives and unloads. Your child is not on the bus. Think about this for a second. There's over 1 million similar situations that occur each and every year across America. I ask you this question. In this frantic moment of major crisis, would you know exactly what to do? I got to tell you, folks, it's every parent's worst nightmare, and it just happened to you. Think about this. Who do you call first? Should you go out and look for your child? Or is it better just to stay home and wait? These are the situations. And the bottom line is the clock is ticking, because when a child turns up missing, time is critical. As I mentioned earlier, those first 24 to 48 hours are absolutely critical. And knowing what to do and when to do it, it can mean the difference between finding the child alive or dead, or unfortunately not at all. And what's more, if you'd only taken just 10 to 15 minutes to discuss preventive personal security and safety and emergency preparedness issues, not just once in a while, but on a regular basis with your child beforehand, he or she probably would have never become missing in the first place. And I know that people are going to say, well, things change and whatever. But the fact is, this information, it may seem frightening, but it's also very true. And the bottom line is pretending that these types of situations don't happen, or having what I call this fake mindset of, oh, we live in a great neighborhood. That can never happen to my child. My child knows what to do. Unfortunately, it's not a way to protect your child. There is something you can do, though, and that is regularly educating your children and helping them learn important safety and security and even emergency preparedness strategies, using a system of prevention through appropriate educational resources that can make a dramatic impact in keeping your kids more safe and secure. So it's all about learning the information and then sharing that information with your children, and remembering you got to do that on a regular basis. You got to reinforce that. So let's talk about tip number one. I've kind of gone into this already. It's understanding that you are ultimately responsible for your children's personal security, their safety, and their emergency preparedness. As we go through this presentation, I'm going to show you why those things are interconnected. But here's my point. You cannot just delegate this responsibility to someone else. The local law enforcement or sheriff's department in your area, community organizations, or maybe it's a sports team that your kids participate in, or even the school teachers. You can't just say, okay, I'm dropping off my kid here, hope everything's fine. No, you've got to be involved. So let's go over to the next slide there, Donna, if you would. We're going to talk about this concept of DPAM, which is what we call dignitary protection agent mindset. And by using this type of mindset and getting used to this, you can actually develop an all hazards emergency preparedness approach to your children, and not only your children, but your overall family response plan for personal security and emergency preparedness. Because often the same plans, the exact same strategies that you would put in place for a specific security or safety issue, they can also have a direct impact on your family's overall emergency preparedness. And this is what Prepare Magazine does such a great job each and every month, with fantastic articles and experts that really provide top quality information that you can use that can play a big role in the overall preparedness for all sorts of incidents. It doesn't have to be a big, shutdown of the government and everything else. It could be something just as simple as a fire or something. And let's talk about this example here and how this kind of keys into what I'm talking about here. The most common disaster the family will likely experience is actually a home fire. So think about this for a second. If you discuss the safety aspects of fire prevention with your 5-year-old, your 10-year-olds, your 13-year-olds, and you do that by also not just talking about it, but literally conducting a regular fire drill with members of your family, you're covering not only the safety aspects of preventing fires, but you're also increasing the emergency preparedness aspect of your overall all hazards plan by having a specific practice plan of action to respond if a fire incident should ever occur at your home. And I would challenge each of you that are on this call tonight as parents, grandparents, and legal guardians, do a fire drill with your family. I know it seems tough. I know it seems like, wow, drop, roll, all this stuff. The kids come home, they're all excited about school. But I will tell you this, practice with your family. I'm talking about getting off the couch, getting on the floor, crawling out of your home, turning off the lights, having a plan of action, talking to your children about not just opening the door, all those kind of things, because this could make a very, very dramatic impact. And I'm going to tell you about it because here's some facts from the National Fire Protection Association. During 2007 through 2011, home structure fires killed an estimated average of 2,570 people and caused an average of 13,210 civilian, which would be non-firefighter injuries per year. The bottom line is males are more likely to be killed or injured in home fires, more so than females, and 56% of the deaths and 53% of the injuries they account for. Some more statistics that we can kind of drive this point home. During that same period, 2007 through 2011, cooking equipment was the leading cause of home fires and home fire injuries. Smoking was the leading cause of home fire deaths, and leading causes of fires that injure or kill. They actually vary by age group and things of that nature. But here's what I want you to understand. 3 out of 5, that's 61% of the people killed in fires started by playing with a heat source, were children under the age of 5. So it's a very, very important thing that we need to keep in mind. I want to give you some more insight on fires and burns, because this is a big challenge, that law enforcement and firefighters, when they respond to these type of calls. This information comes from Safe Kids Worldwide. It discusses just some more additional insight for you on fatalities. 325 children ages 19 and under actually died from fires or burns in just 2011. 85% or 277 deaths were actually in residential home fires. 47% of the children who died from fires or burns were age 4 or under. The death rate for children this age is almost twice that of 5 to 9-year-olds and almost 4 times that of 10 and 14-year-olds. On the injury side of the house, over 136,450 children aged 19 and under were seen in emergency rooms for fire and burn injuries. So some additional things to keep in mind. Working smoke alarms reduce the chance of dying in a reported home fire by more than half. When was the last time you checked your home alarm, your smoke alarm, to make sure that it's working, make sure that it has a new battery? A lot of folks don't realize the smoke alarms that are in most residential homes across America should be changed every 5 to 10 years, the whole entire unit, not just the battery. Cooking equipment is the leading cause of home fires and home fire injuries. And this is another important one. It only takes 2 minutes for a fire to fill a home with black smoke or engulf it in flames. And most deadly fires occur at night. Write this down, what I'm going to give you right now. A couple of items you should always keep by your bed every night before you go to sleep. And we teach this in our dignitary protection stuff, is by your bed, have a working flashlight, shoes, and a whistle. Again, a flashlight, shoes, and a whistle. You just never know when you might have a situation, and you'll want to have those things at your disposal. So just a couple of things on fire, because it is a huge challenge. We've had several people, we're just outside of the Washington, D.C. area here, and just in the last couple of weeks, several people have actually been killed in fire. So just a very, very sad situation. Let's go on to number 3. It's the tip that means to develop and practice a real family emergency preparedness communications plan. This is very, very critical, because you've got to communicate with your children. Let them know that, obviously the personal security, the safety, and emergency preparedness, it's extremely important to you. And I know this is one of those Captain Obvious moments, but you may know it, but do your children know it? As you know, our young kids, they often hear you, but they don't understand. And then we have our older kids who understand, but they just don't want to listen. So it's one of those things that you really kind of have to think about, but it's never a situation where it's too early or too late to talk with your kids about their personal safety and security. So it's a good time to do it. And right there below, as you know, you can't learn everything in one single session. Child safety and security isn't a simple one-time education program. It's ongoing. It has to be kind of, moved in on a regular basis. So we'll go ahead and we've already talked about this importance to regularly, talk and communicate. But remember, not only is it communicating, it's also listening for what your children are telling you and what they're not telling you, because oftentimes you need to read between the lines. So no matter what the ages of your children are, one of the best strategies for continuing to educate them about the importance of personal security, safety, and disaster preparedness without scaring them is to communicate with them on a regular basis, while also empowering them with the proper knowledge, tools, and permission to do whatever it takes to remain safe and confident. And this is very, very important, because you don't just want to talk to them and say, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, you should be doing this. You want to fill in the gaps as to why would you want to do that. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, and the importance of you leading by example, because your children really do watch what you do. So for younger kids, great thing to do with them is role playing. It may be more appropriate whereas older kids are most likely going to require a different approach with a little bit of creativity. But one of the big things is getting them involved, and one of the great ways you can do that, look at the local news. You turn on the news, there's this problem, there's that problem, and you don't want to scare children, but ask them, well, what would you do? What would you do? What's our game plan? So you'll see some examples there on the screen. With your younger kids, if they get lost or separated from you and they're at the shopping mall or a sporting event, what should they do? What is the game plan? What's the family emergency preparedness plan? One of the things we often stress is that you want to have your child as much as possible be able to stay in that same area and seek an adult to help them. Because oftentimes if you lose a kid in a certain area, where your kid last was. So having them remain in that area if they get lost or separated, from you, that's something you can do. But you need to talk about this before. The other thing is, and this comes from the original founder of Child Shield over 25 years ago. He talked about this issue of, if you call out for your child, wait to hear a response. If you Jenny, 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 you're not listening to hear Jenny respond back. So make sure that if you are going to call out your child's name, make sure that you take a moment to listen. Another one, what if they're at school and there's a tornado that strikes, or there's a severe weather incident that occurs and you're not there? And think about this. Parents are usually at your kid's school all the time. No, if you're at work or you're doing travel or something else going on. So you need to have a game plan. What should they do? Are they going to be better seeking cover? Are they going to shelter in place? If they do shelter in place, are they going to have additional things? We've seen deadly tornadoes all across the United States and other severe weather incidents, and you got to have a game plan before something happens. Same thing. What if there's an active shooter incident at their school or the local movie theater? We're going to talk about, one particular thing that we definitely want you to be aware of, but you need to have a plan of how you're going to handle that with your child. What if someone attempts to grab your child or put them in a vehicle? One of the things, especially if they're smaller kids, we teach kids become dead weight. In other words, just kind of drop yourself down to the ground, which makes it more difficult for somebody to drag you. If you have a bike and you're on your bike and somebody tries to get you off your bike, basically clutch yourself to the bike. I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult for a suspect to try to put, a kid and the bike into a trunk or something like that. Yell fire. And we teach this, yell fire versus yell help. So a lot of times people don't hear help, but if they hear fire, they immediately tend to look around and get involved. And also screaming out things such as, "You're not my mommy, you're not my daddy, call 911." People hear that, and that way they can get involved. And that, at the end of the day, is what you want to do, is get people involved and see what's going on. Let's talk about tip number 4. It's teaching your children to always know their current location in case of an emergency to summon first responders. This is very important, and it's kind of difficult sometimes, especially for young children. But as early as possible, be sure to teach your children to remember their full name, their address, their telephone number, as well as how to properly call 911 in case of emergency. I'm sure you've seen on television instances where even small children have had the wherewithal to know to pick up the phone and dial 911 because their mom has passed out, maybe from diabetic shock or some other situation. And they've literally been able to save their parent's life because they knew what to do. So it's very, very important to teach children that. Now, as a law enforcement officer, I would also say it's very important to teach them not to call 911 if it's not an emergency situation. And we've had this happen where, as a police officer, I've responded to calls where we call it a 911 hang up, where somebody's called and they've hung up the phone. And most agencies will send an officer out or a pair of officers out just to check to make sure everything's okay. One other tip that I would say, if you have a situation where it's a home invasion, it's something major, teach your kid to not only dial 911, but not to hang up the phone. That way the dispatchers can listen into what's going on. They can advise the units that are responding to the scene if there's any updates and information, and you're definitely going to get a response when there's an open line. As your children get older, help them become more aware of their surroundings, and other important addresses and locations. And what I mean by this is, maybe you're out at the local mall, you might say, "Well, Johnny, what store are we in? Or are we at the food court?" Give landmark situations, especially in emergency situations, as police officers respond. All the information coming in is very critical, but it helps the law enforcement officers make key decisions as to how they're going to approach a situation and depending on what is going on. Now, this next thing we have here is an important tip, and I'm not sure if folks on the line have done this, but I highly recommend you do this, and I highly recommend you do it in the next 24 hours. Call your local law enforcement agency, the local police department, sheriff's department, or perhaps you have some other type of law enforcement agency that's responsible for your area. Call them on a non-emergency line and tell them that you'd like to check your 911 phone call to their dispatch center to confirm the address that actually comes up on their screen. Folks, this is very, very important. If you're here tonight and you're here to get information regarding safety of your children, this is also a good tip if you have older parents to check those lines and make sure that when 911 is dialed from the phone within the home, that it actually shows up the address inside of the communication center. I cannot tell you the number of times as a police officer, both on the West Coast and here in the Washington, D.C. region, of the fact that the location data is so critical sometimes when responding to a call, and even your business location. We've had situations where folks have actually passed away because they weren't able to get the first responders there in time because they had the wrong information. And I also want to say one other caveat with that. Remember, many folks today are moving away from home landline phones. This particular strategy is designed specifically for home landline-based phones. And of course, with cellular, it's a totally different cat. But if you do have a home line, definitely be sure to do that. Number 5, why teaching your children not to talk to strangers just isn't enough to keep your children safe from harm in today's often dangerous and violent world. The bottom line is that one of the big challenges that has happened is that in many cases involving crimes against children, the suspect is actually known to the child, to the victim. So whether it's a family friend or it's a relative committing a crime against a very young child, or even a college-age boyfriend slipping a narcotic into your daughter's drink at a college party, the suspect is actually oftentimes known to the victim, and therefore they're not necessarily considered a stranger danger threat. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but it's very, very important for you as a parent, grandparent, or legal guardian to really define for your child what is in fact a stranger. So that way, when things happen that shouldn't happen, your child will not be thinking, well, it's not a stranger. Number 6, very important tip here. Your child might actually be the first responder during a critical incident. We teach this in our courses, not only for young people, but also adults as well. A lot of people think when something happens, oh, I'm just going to pick up the phone, I'm going to call 911, and the police are going to race to the scene, the fire department's going to show up, everything's going to be okay. Well, folks, I got news for you. It's going to take a while for law enforcement to get on the scene unless they're actually there when something happens. And depending on the situation, that response is going to change a little bit based on officer survival tactics, based on the actual situation. So just remember that when things happen sometimes, there may take a while for those law enforcement arrive on the scene. So whether it's an attempted child abduction, like we saw in Washington State a couple of months back, where a suspect actually tried to run away with an infant little boy. His 8-year-old sister started running after the suspect, and then her little brother started running after her, and then teenagers in the neighborhood got involved, and then adults got involved. And the good news is the infant son was recovered uninjured. But that's a great example of how an 8-year-old girl is actually involved in a real critical emergency right away. So it could be a school shooting, it could be a car accident, it could be a fire. What about the stage collapse that occurred just last week, where folks were on a stage dancing, and then all of a sudden the stage collapses? So there's all sorts of things that can happen. And just remember this. Oftentimes you or even children are going to usually be immediately on the scene of the criminal act, as well as any natural and man-made disaster before the professionally trained first responders can actually arrive on the scene. So you got to think in terms of that. And I mention this because of the fact that it's highly likely that at some point your child might actually be a first responder. It's very, very important when it's appropriate to actually help your child obtain certain skills and expertise that actually could help them in an emergency crisis. What am I talking about here? Well, there's vital life-saving skills that you can learn, such as basic first aid, CPR, rescue breathing. They've kind of moved away from that, but it could actually help save a life. or someone in a disaster. Learning important safety basics, such as this very, very important thing, which is never, ever, ever enter a burning building or re-enter a home once you've come out. Avoiding down power lines or attempting to drive a vehicle if you've got a 16 or 17-year-old that's got a license and now they're driving, the importance of them not driving through a flooded roadway, that can be life or death information that if your child has, they can make the appropriate decisions. And some of this training that's available now, it's being done at younger and younger ages. I recently had a doctor on our show from one of the hospital systems up in New York, and they were actually training 7th and 8th graders in CPR. So oftentimes the Boy Scouts or maybe it's the local YMCA might be offering these courses. So encourage your children to get involved. And I also encourage you, if you don't have those certain skills, lead by example and participate with your kids in getting some of those those vital skills. And the power behind this is it gives you and your children the ability to, again, what I call respond, not just react when a critical emergency incident occurs. So very, very important. Let's go over to the next slide there. Another idea you might consider is having your children participate in some quality self-defense training. If they are doing this, it's important for them to concentrate on effective getaway techniques that can also be of assistance in helping children build their situational awareness skills and their self-confidence. But I really want to really kind of hit this point that it's very, very important to keep in mind. It's much more vital for children to become aware of certain potential dangerous situations and avoid them in the first place instead of trying to fight their way out of a bad situation. So even if they get those, self-defense skills, I'm not trying to be Captain Obvious here, but there are some things they can do. Number 7, be routinely involved in your child's lives. Again, Captain Obvious. But think about this: the incidents of bullying, cyberbullying, sexting, texting, drug and alcohol abuse, distracted driving. Folks, take a look at the statistics just on teen domestic violence. It's huge. The number of teen mental illness challenges out there, and even teen suicide, they're at an all-time high. Kids are under a lot of pressure, and they may not necessarily tell you what's going on, but it's imperative for you to be able to seek out quality information and resources that you can help your children deal with a wide array of issues before it's way too late. And there's lots of different programs out here. There's lots of different informational resources that you get to kind of get an idea of what's going on, especially with this cyberbullying and bullying. It's real. We've had several instances across the country where, young kids have killed themselves because of things people have said about them online and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, you're ultimately responsible for your kids' personal security, safety, and emergency preparedness. You've got to have those conversations and get through to them. Let's go on to the next slide. And what I want to do here is talk about some basic children's safety guideline tips, and we're going to cover some for younger kids, for middle school through high school, and then we'll talk about some of the college, kid situations as well. And the reason I want to do this real quickly, as parents, what you're going to do with your younger kids is going to be totally different than if you're talking to, your kid is in high school and then a kid that's off to college. Just some quick statistics here, again, from Safe Kids Worldwide. Fatalities, suffocation, and this is for the younger kids. 1,169 children aged 19 and under died from suffocation just in 2011. 77% of those children, which is 896 who suffocated, were under the age of 1 year old. 59%, 692 who suffocated were boys. So just very, very important to remember. Another huge challenge is TV tip-overs, furniture and appliance tip-overs. I don't know if any of you are aware of this, but it is a huge challenge where several kids are actually, pass away each year because of situations involving appliances and so forth actually falling onto them. So something to definitely keep in mind. Falls, 138 children ages under 19 died in falls in 2001. I'm going to speed up a bit here. I want to talk real quick about poisoning safety. 838 children aged 19 and under died from poisonings in 2011. 746 of these deaths were drug related. It's a big, big issue out there. And also over 125,000 children under the age of 19 were actually seen in emergency rooms for non-fatal poisonings. Big issue here, children 13 to 24 months are most frequently seen in emergency departments after getting into medication. So got to keep that in mind, especially if you have young toddlers. The leading cause of non-medication exposure calls to poison control centers for children ages 5 and under, cosmetics and personal care products, household cleaning substances, and things of that nature. So just very, very important. Last thing on the safety side I want to cover real quick is the issue of the fact that 10 people a day drown in the U.S., according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, when it comes to pool safety. Just cannot say enough. 970 children ages 19 and under drowned in 2011. 51% of those kids, 490 who drowned, were under the age of 4. 4 important tips for you with regard to your kids and water. Watch your children very closely if they're at a pool. Non-swimmers should always wear life jackets. No diving in water. You need at least 9 feet of water in order to do dives, and no long holding of the breath. So just a couple of things there on the safety aspect. Let's talk specifically also about the security side for our younger children. We've talked about earlier the importance of defining what is a stranger. You need to kind of make sure that your children actually know that your definition of a stranger. So example, it may be anyone you as a parent have not personally met or know. You'll also see there, never talk to strangers, go anywhere with a stranger, take anything from a stranger. If someone asks a personal questions or they make you feel uncomfortable, or perhaps they touch you in an inappropriate area of your body, they need to be telling you about it, or an adult that they trust. It's also a good thing for you to point out to those children what are the areas that people shouldn't be touching, just so they know. If they're going to be late, they always phone home. And of course, before they go anywhere with anyone at any time, they're getting their parents' permission. Let's go and go over to the next slide. When your children are away from home, it's so imperative to teach them the importance of safety in numbers. It's great for them to stick close to friends or stay in a group at all times. I'm amazed sometimes I'll be out and about and you'll see fairly young kids and they're not accompanied by anyone, and it just kind of puts my radar up like what's going on. So, folks need to really be practicing the safety in numbers. You want to develop a secret family code word for your children to remember. Instruct your kids to never go anywhere with anyone who cannot tell them your family code word. That word should be changed on a fairly regular basis, but not like every week or something. And then be very careful of how many people that you give the code word to. So if you got, Aunt Sally and, Uncle John, all these people have, access to the family word code, that's not going to be very effective. When they do answer the telephone, they never give out any information to anyone they don't know. That last one there, very, very important. This has been covered on many of the local news broadcasts, that many home invasions have occurred when children unknowingly actually open the front door to complete strangers. So you want to be sure to teach your kids that you want them to keep the doors and the windows locked at all times. And even when you're home, remind them not to, open up the door without your permission. As we go over to the next slide, just a couple of quick tips. If you have children that are a little bit older, say middle school through high school, this is very important. Make clear and very concise household rules and expectations, and make sure your child understands them. It's all about communication with your children. So you got to be constantly communicating with them. Also, you want to teach your child to walk with confidence, walk with a sense of purpose, their head up high, and make sure they have good eye contact. And these two tips actually come from our good buddy, Sergeant James Giamonero, who's a full-time law enforcement officer in the state of Florida. He wrote the book called Parents, Predators, and Prevention. It's a complete guide to keeping your kids safe and confident. And one of the things he always talks about is bad guys usually don't have alternate plans. They just have alternate victims. So the more aware and confident your child is, the less likely they will become a victim. Let's also remember to just kind of a strategy. Advise your kids to walk on the sidewalks of main streets. My personal thought process is to walk in the direction of oncoming traffic. It gives a barrier if somebody tries to snatch them. Certainly they want to avoid alleys, deserted areas, and potential shortcuts through unsafe areas. Again, common basic stuff, but you'd be surprised at the number of folks that go, I never thought of that. Always want to know where your children are, what their activities are, who they're with. depending on their age. You might also want to have a cell phone. Another challenge is a lot of families today, kids live with separated parents. So they're with one parent part of the time, another parent the other part of the time, or their stepchildren, whatever. So it's also very important that the whole family be on the right communication page in case, let's say, for instance, Sally, who normally is home at 4:30, isn't home at 4:30 because she's actually staying the night at someone's house, but that wasn't communicated to all the members of the family. And so now we have a crisis that could have been avoided if everyone knew what was going on. Also, there at the bottom, make sure that you have your kids' friends' phone numbers as well as their parents' phone numbers programmed into your phone, because that way, if there is an emergency, at least you can, get in contact with other folks relatively quickly. It goes without saying, as we go over to the next slide there, that another, very, very huge challenge right now is internet safety and security with our children. It's important to explain, to especially the younger children, that the person they are chatting with online or via text may not be the same person in real life. So you're going to want to be monitoring your children's email, text messages, any of their social media accounts, depending on their age and so forth. And you're going to be checking for inappropriate language, conversations, or signs or threats of bullying on a regular basis. And there's a lot of things that you can do there, a lot of resources and so forth. I know we're coming up here on the time and so forth, so just real quickly on college students, a lot of good things that you can do to increase the safety of your college students. And remember, just because they've moved on to college and they're now, doing their own things, it is so imperative that our college students pay particular attention to their personal security and safety. They want to be aware that there's a lot of crime that occurs, including violent attacks that have been increasing on many college campuses. And so it's important that these incidents be taken very seriously, not only by the student, but, you as a parent and so forth, so you know what's going on. Make a list of your campus emergency phone numbers as well as the numbers for the campus police or security personnel. Obviously, you want your children to have that, but you want to have that stuff as well. Be especially cautious at night. During the evening hours. Most college campuses, they do have police or security personnel that can actually assist students and get them to and from their dorms, parking lots, and things like that. And then moving on to the next slide as we close out here, some other things to keep in mind is that you want to make sure that you have your kids' current school work and activity schedule. The fact that dormitories usually have locked entrances and exits, so you want to make sure your kids aren't propping the doors open for their friends or something. And of course, if they're at a library, very quiet, often secluded area, it's also a good place where folks get victimized. So you want to teach your son or daughter to go to libraries and places like that with a study buddy. So again, lots of information there, especially when it comes to keeping our kids safe, the concerns of alcohol, whether you're drinking alcohol or the fact that you never want to go to a party alone, never leave your drink unattended. Again, basic situations that can play a key role in keeping our kids safe. Next slide, please. So tip number 9 is develop a growing list, library of articles, books, CDs, and DVDs to really educate yourself and your children on proper personal security, safety, and emergency preparedness issues. I realize we are all very, very busy today. We've got so much stuff that we're doing, but it makes good sense to make sure that you have a growing library so that the latest information, some of the things that are going on, and it can help you develop your own game plan and then share that information with your children, depending on their ages. Share it with your neighbors, have your backup plans, and so forth. And then the last slide there that we're going to talk about tonight is tip number 10, and that is the importance of leading by example. Whether your children admit it or not, they really do watch what you do. And so many of life's real powerful lessons and mental mindsets your children carry through their lives into adulthood are actually a direct result of what they have learned by watching you. So make sure you're being a good example. When it comes to your own personal security and safety, do you practice safety and security by being aware of your surroundings and having a real plan of action? So this is so very, very important. So if you can answer that you do that stuff, fantastic. If not, I would encourage you to ask yourself, when would now be a great time to get started on your journey to being properly prepared before disaster strikes? And that completes what we were going to talk about this evening. I do want to thank each of you for your time and attendance on tonight's Prepare magazine, Preparinar. It's been real exciting to be here and share information. And so, Donna, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Awesome. That is some great stuff. Just tons of it. And I know there's probably more you could have even expounded upon and gone into on further detail. The statistics of some things are so extremely alarming, um, but they need to be. A lot of people don't think about them, so they need to be told. And a lot of those things, I have to say, I don't feel like such a bad helicopter mom because I did so many of them already when
Hmm.
they were growing up. At least I feel like, yay! I tried to train parents of children that I worked with at camps to do some of these things, and of course staff to very much treat kids the same way with almost a parenting attitude. Some of that stuff was just I'd never thought of, but a lot of it I don't feel so bad for doing anymore now that you said it. So I am going to toggle over to, if you don't mind, toggle over and look at the email, hoping that if you had questions for Al, please send them to preparinars at gmail.com, because I'm looking at our chat is still trying to load and it just has not loaded at all. So I'm going to go over there and look real quick. You have an offer to give everybody if they're interested in the Child Shield program. It's for people who actually came and attended. Could you tell everybody about that and how they can go about saving some money that if they want to get involved in the program?
Super. Be more than happy to share some details. We are very, very excited, Donna, to be with you on tonight's broadcast and so forth. And what we wanted to do is put together a very, very special deal for people that are involved in Prepare Magazine. However you came to tonight's information and so forth. So what we put together is we have two different pricing packages for the Child Shield USA program. What you can do is go over to www.childshieldUSA.com. Again, that's www.childshieldUSA.com. And you can read all about the information about our program, what we do, how we do it, some of the benefits, and so forth. And then what we'd like to do, if you decide this is a program that you'd like to get for your family, and it includes all of your children, from infants all the way up to college age students up to age 24, if they are away attending college or trade school or what have you, it covers all of your children in the household. The one-time cost for our basic program is $399. And then it's just $19.95 a month for the ongoing program, which includes those benefits we were talking about earlier in the event that your child should ever end up being reported missing to a local law enforcement agency. And what we put together for all the members from Prepare Magazine is a $50 discount off of our first in package. And what we're doing right now, we've had some technical challenges. Today has just not been a good day for technology, I will tell you that. But if you have any interest in our program or you'd like to get more information, I would encourage you to call our office. Our main number for Child Shield is 1-800-OK-CHILD. Again, that's 1-800-OK-CHILD. I would also ask that you can also reach out to me directly at my office here right outside the nation's capital in Arlington, Virginia at 703-563-7365. Again, that's 703-563-7365. And then you'll want to use this special code, PREPARE. So the special code is PREPARE. That's going to be our family secret code word. So if you say the word prepare and you call our office and say, look, I'm interested in more information, we will make sure that you get that $50 discount. We do have a second offer. We have an upgrade offer, which includes a lot more stuff, including our My Virtual Bodyguard program, where we have a full team of very, very well-known, high-profile personal security, safety, and emergency preparedness experts. You've seen some of these folks on the Dr. Oz show, on Spike TV, on Code Cases, A&E's Code Cases file. They've been on my Code Red show. They've been on Fox and CNN and so forth. And they're part of our network of special experts that work with us at Child Shield USA. And so if you do the upgrade offer, the upgrade one-time offer is $799. It includes our first offer plus all the additional things that you get with our ongoing training and so forth, and you get $100 off of that package. So the same word is prepare. So if either of these are of interest to you, visit our main website, again, at www.childshieldUSA.com, peruse through the various information and so forth, and then call us at either 1-800-OK-CHILD or my direct line, 703-563-7365, and we will get you all squared away with the secret family code word of prepare.
Wonderful. Now, what's interesting is you mentioned the secret family code word, and that is something that we implemented when my children were young. And I know a lot of people have had, there was a question about that. What do you mean by a secret family code word? Is it, um, okay, we have a horror story. It's not personal, but we know in the group that we worked with, that someone came to pick up a child from camp, not my camp. This is what we used in teaching our staff how to screen people who's allowed to pick up whom. And they actually brought the parent's driver's license and said, look, he gave me the driver's license to pick up his daughter. I'm fine. Well, this was some other camp and they let the child go. Well, he got the driver's license because he killed both parents at home.
Mhm.
So he had, it did not ever occur that he could come by that driver's license. We, of course, did the same thing to the children that he picked up. Terrible, horrible story. And so we didn't, we were really obnoxious staff. People had to verify, anyone other than you, I need to have it in writing from you. They need to come by, show me their driver's license. They have to be on the list. But what was interesting is our camps grew because people went, oh, they're not going to just hand my kids off to somebody. They're very particular. And so
Yeah.
we developed a code word with our kids. If
Mhm.
anyone else tried to pick them up from school, they had to ask, what's the code word? And 9 times out of 10, the person wouldn't know. And even if it's just because mom forgot, the kids had the guts to say, I'm not going. You don't know the code word, I'm not going. So how do you implement that with children? How would you say that's the best way someone can start that?
Well, number one, a very, very good question. And also, Donna, thanks for sharing about what happened because there's so many situations that happen all the time. And even having a backup to the backup. One of the great things about what we do at Child Shield is, especially with our upgrade program, our My Virtual Bodyguard program, it actually includes family preparedness software to help you set up your full-blown emergency preparedness plan. And also one of our team members, our emergency preparedness experts, is a gentleman named Paul Purcell. He wrote the book Disaster Prep 101. It's the ultimate guide to emergency readiness. I always joke that it's not a book for one seating. It's over 500 pages of information, plus two resource DVDs with an additional 1,500 resources and stuff. So it's lots of great information. But I bring up Paul's book because within Paul's book, he actually talks about this issue of what happens, not just if it's a criminal situation, but what happens if mom or dad are injured in a vehicle accident and something has to be done. So basically, what we're talking about with the code word, and I'm so glad you asked the question there from the audience. Thank you so much for that. Basically, a code word is a word that only you, as members of the family, would know, and that you would memorize that code word so that if ever there was a situation like what Donna was just explaining, somebody's showing up at school, they're showing up at the daycare, they're showing up somewhere to pick up your child, that person must have the family secret code word in order to pick up your child. And then with Paul Purcell, we have some additional things that we think you should have, such as a lot of people don't think about this, but let's say, for instance, you have a Hurricane Katrina type situation. Not only might you be on the list, but in some cases, you're going to be required to produce other documentation that allows you to secure that child, especially in an emergency. So how do you do that? And this is what we do in the family emergency preparedness side of the house, is we teach folks why this is so important. So again, it's a word that only members of the family would know. Preferably, it's got a very uniqueness to it. It's not something that can easily be figured out, but it gives your child that little bit of ability, what we were talking about earlier, to take command of their emergency preparedness and safety. Because I'll tell you this, if you've got somebody showing up at a daycare center to pick up a child and they can't give the code word, I'm pretty certain that the staff there is going to be a little bit concerned, and they're probably going to have a local call to the police for a little bit of community outreach to that individual
Yeah.
as to why he is attempting to secure that child.
Yeah.
Hopefully it helps.
And there is also the situation you mentioned, and this is bringing up another point of split families and custody battles.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a stranger trying to pick up that child and leave the state, leave the country. It may be their actual biological parent or someone, even a step parent at that point. Staff, of course, has to know, just because the kid says, oh yeah, that's my mom, I haven't seen her in 2 months,
Mm-hmm.
just let the kid go. But your child probably also needs to be aware in a very delicate manner. How do you, I mean, that's the question. How do you tell them you can't go with daddy if it's not his weekend? How do
Mhm.
you, how do you tell him that? That's kind of the question that's going on.
Yeah, and I think that that's just one of those things that goes back to communication. You have to be teaching your child these things on a regular basis, especially the younger children. They're not going to get it right away. But I would also be letting the staff members know about the particular situation, some of the concerns that the custodial parent may have, because that is a huge challenge. In fact, it's something that we didn't get a chance to talk about, but a lot of people don't realize that if you call the local law enforcement to make a missing children report, one of the first things they're going to ask you is, do you have legal custody of the child?
Right.
And that becomes the situation. So I'm not trying to not answer the question, but at the end of the day, it's really going to be a combination of communication, not only with the child and making them understand the challenge, but also, whoever the other folks are going to be that are going to be the adult folks that are going to be there, that would, be involved, that, hey, there's a challenge here, and this isn't the right information. And they do need to be aware of that, because without being told that that's a challenge, they won't necessarily know.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to get law enforcement involved, because even if they have to respond and it turns out to be nothing, at least it's been, checked out and verified.
Exactly. I appreciate that, because I think something we need to remember, and this is as a basically a closing remark, is that we have to be able to put our pride aside and be pretty transparent with what's really going on to keep our children safe.
Hmm.
And if we as adults, my children are adults now, and when they were little, they were like, I thought grown-ups knew everything, because they when they're small, they have that perception that when I get older, I'll know everything because grown-ups know everything. I think it actually helps children to realize we can be very transparent, put our pride aside to say, look, there are situations going on that someone needs to be aware of to help me keep my child safe. That is a higher priority than looking like you got it all together.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Donnie. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on tonight. And I know that you're going to probably get a lot of input and calls and questions later on, because we are going to let this play for a little while. The offer that you've given for people to use the code word of prepare to save $50 to $100 on the program is good until what? The 6th? Is that what we discussed?
Yeah, it's till May 6th, so just one day after Cinco de Mayo.
I know. A week from tonight. And I know if for any reason you're coming by this on a replay, or you're one of the members and you happen upon it, months after, please still feel free to give Al a call, and give them a call at Child Shield USA if this is something that you feel like will bolster the preventativeness of keeping your children safe, not the after fact. That is a little bit tough to swallow, but preventiveness is actually the most important thing when it comes to your child's safety. So thank you so much, Al, for being on tonight. I enjoyed it. Even our blips and weird things that happened, we pulled it off.
Yes, it's been a lot of fun to join you tonight, and hopefully everyone got a lot of great information. Again, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us at 1-800-OK-CHILD. And as I tell everyone, be vigilant, be prepared, and be safe. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you. God bless.